Hi, let's start this chapter. Okay. Um, in the earlier chapter, we brought an example of how to do a sales process, and we converted it so the programmers can see how these things can be done. We also brought how to do a buying process. And then we put it together and we converted it to a flow BPM. And now we're going to look at an event. So we put these two together, we saw it, and now we're looking at an event, an order. That's, your process you need to do. How the calculation, how the accounting procedures happen. So this is what you call a conversion of business process. And then later on, we will talk in the next chapter about integrating all these activities, how it is done. So in this chapter of accounting information systems, we'll describe the activities that compromise the conversions process. We will develop an activity model of the conversion process using BPMN. Understand and apply a different activity modeling options, how these are working together, and then develop the business rules to implement controls for the conversion process. Using UML, we will develop a structure model for conversion process and implement a maybe relationship database. I don't think this would be part of your concerns. Anyway, here is a review of accounting, conversion accounting. Let's analyze it together. Okay. Now, back to our example. And in our example is the Sunset graphic conversion process. And we talked about this company is doing graphics. And it's about when the quantity on hand of a product dropped below the minimum level, the item manager authorized production to increase the quantity on hand for some. And based on the bill of material of that item, they issue material into a work process. Sunset Partners then construct the items and upon the completion, the product were placed in the inventory. So this is the process. Now, if we look at it in the BPMN, basic conversion of BPM, we know that there is an authorization happens from the management and raw material issued, then the record transferred from raw material inventory to a work in a process, start in accounting. Then they perform the work, which is added directly labors and allocate overhead work in a process, and then complete the production, which is transfer the finished goods inventory. So this is the basic activity model implemented the process steps. If we refining it and we said if we can put it 2 lanes and 1 lane is inventory management and another where they do a conversion employees and this all belong to the sunset. What do you have? You have an authorization of production happening here, and just through the authorization, you have to do one of the things. If you reject it, it goes back to complete production, updated, if you have it. If you don't have it, the next step, you set up the batch. And if the setup of the batch happen, you raw materials, you call on the raw materials. In the raw materials, will you start the perform work, as you see in the points here. Once you start performing the work, you you check the inspect the work after you perform the work. And if it's rejected, if this is disagreed or discarded, it goes back to the raw material to fix up the problem. If it's not, then moves on to this part of it where then says, does the batch, the whole request completed according to the standard? If it's not, then goes back to authorization for getting more. But if it's yes, then the production completed and got transferred to the warehouse. So uh, define each steps, function, error handling. We're looking at where the things might go wrong, so or where the authorization happened, where these issues we need to look at them. So if we take all this process and we collapse this to the sub process and we just put it in one simplified process, we know that there is an authorization production and there is a setup batch. And if the setup batch processing happening, if it's all done, you complete the production and it's there. If it's no, goes back, and whether is you need to perfect this or you get the authorization more as to do a setup batch and keep continue doing it. So looping sub process for the production batch, because sometimes you need to produce more and more. Looping indicates that the process repeats until some specified condition is met, whether quantity, quality, or quantity and quality. Now, so the contents of sub-process is issuing raw material, perform work, inspect the work. If it's an error, discard it, throw it in a garbage or whatever, and then if it's not, continue with it. This content of collapsed subprocess are defined separately. So there is a small content, is each content as the state, you need to define it separately from the previous one, which is, this is the one. This is the one in the middle, batch processing. It is this one, batch processing, expanding subprocess. That's to simplify or start generalizing and then go into details. So in this case, the business rules example for conversion process is there is a process step, which is there is an, as we said, there is an authorization production or authorized production, and there is issuing a raw material. So there is two steps in it. One is authorizing and one is issuing. In the authorization, the intention is partner with the proper authority, authorize the production to ensure the finished good available to meet the expected demand. The partner or the author person should supervise the authority. It should be more than 5,000. If it's less than 5,000, it can then automatically. But if it's more than 5,000, it should be authorized by supervisor. And who has the access? Who has the access control? We said the partner authorizing the production cannot modify inventory record. So he cannot go to the inventory record, increase it or decrease it in order to authorize these things. And the application control system must provide authorization order, number control, default values, range of and limits and checks, and create an audit trial. Always needs to create an audit trial. Who is, who has the access control, what's the application can do, who has authorization, and what's the intention of that process. Now, the second step, which is issuing a raw materials. Now, issuing from a raw material according to the bill of material recorded accurately. You cannot just issue according to the bill. which is done by the authorized partner. Now, partner issuing materials in the authorization must not be same partner of, doing the production, because those can be in the warehouse, and production has a different reason for producing, so they have to be separated. Now, who has the access control for it is partner recording the issue of materials cannot be modified by bill of material. And the system, as we said, system must only allow partners to enter the number of items issued. So based on a bill of materials, subject to a range of limit check and on the quantity, we looked at it. So the business rule types, we have supervisor must authorize production if it's more than 5,000. We have an example, which is example of obligatory rules status would show occurred. And also partner issuing material must not be same partner that authorizing the production. So that's example of prohibited rules state what should not occur. Just looking at this, at the first one, which is number one here, product authorization is authorization to produce. And then what we have a specific finished good to be produced. So you specs, you put it there. And you build the record, the material issued, here. Now, you also need, by the way, the employees to get involved into these stages and management supervisor. And then the 5 is when you get involved, the laborers into the processing. So these are the UML class model version. It's the basic one. Here is the relationship database. Just take a look at it. You don't need to understand it, how it works, because we brought an example of higher education, how it works. Now, what we saw last time is there is an integrated model between purchase and sales, and this is the same thing. When you do a purchase, there is a suppliers. When you do sales, there is a customer. You pay to the suppliers according to the purchase and certain materials. And you get the money from the customer according to supply cash receipting. So there is a raw materials ordered from suppliers, product produced, given to the customer, and all done by the employees. Sometimes you need to authorize certain level. So the resource and internal agent are shared across the process here. Event and external agent are process specific. So there is external agent like the customer and the supplier, but the employees as a internal. So that's the end of the chapter.